Hey guys, I just wanted to show you something here I think you'll find useful with your rod building. It's a little tool. It's one of the blades for a deburring tool. And I use these deburring tools a lot when I'm building the rod wrapping jigs that I sell on eBay. I use the deburring tools to remove burrs from the plastic on the wrapping jig from the holes that I've drilled. And I use a stationary one to scrape down the sharp edges on the plastic after I cut it on the table saw. I use that to scrape that down. Nice thing about these deburring tools is that they're very rigid. There's no flex in this at all. It's very sharp. It's practically razor blade sharp, but it's shaped differently. As you can see, there's a curvature to it. And all this is a dowel rod that I drilled a hole in, and I put in one of the deburring blades in that hole, and I epoxied that blade into the dowel rod. That way it can't rotate. On a typical deburring tool, it's designed for removing burrs in holes so it rotates. And if you need a stationary one, this is what I came up with to do that, because it's so good for scraping. And I've been using these on building my rod jigs for a long time. I've got a few rods that I need to remove the guides on where they're broken. So I took a look at this as a possible way of doing that, and I found out it works really, really well. So I thought I'd share this with y'all, see what you think. And I think there's some other uses for it too. I'll show you that also. So ordinarily you'd use a razor blade, or you'd use an X-Acto knife for cutting the epoxy off of guide wraps. Let me show you what I like about using this deburring blade though. First of all, I like the shape of it, and with a handle on it, your finger doesn't have to get up here like you would with a razor blade or an X-Acto knife. These flex a lot also, so it's nice to have this rigid blade. And also your X-Acto knives and your razor blades are pretty thin, where you'd want to put pressure possibly on them, so they're a little uncomfortable to work with. And they're super sharp. If you slip with them, it's easy to cut yourself or cut something. Now you can cut yourself on these, but you're not quite as likely to, because the taper is a little different. So it won't slice quite as easily as a razor blade, although it's super sharp. If you do cut yourself on that, you could cut yourself. So let me show you how this works, where I've got this broken guide that needs to come off of this rod here. I like to just put the deburring tool down and just push a little with this thumb like this, and it will cut right into that epoxy. You see how easy that was? Super easy. Because it's kind of rounded on the back side, that's real comfortable to put your thumb against and push. If you're pushing with your thumb, even if you slip, you're not going to go way up here and nick the blank somewhere. So that cuts super easy, and it just goes right into that and cuts that epoxy right off of that guide wrap. And to me, it's easier to control than an X-Acto knife is, and it's easier to control than a regular single edge razor blade. Everybody's different. Everybody likes different things, but this is an option out there you might want to take a look at. Again, it's just a dowel rod, and I drilled a hole in it and epoxied one of these deburring blades into it. I don't have an affiliate account with Amazon, but I'll put a link down there. So it's not an affiliate link. I don't get paid for recommending things to you. This is just something I've tried and I think works really well. And I think you can see how quickly you can cut away epoxy. And even if you want to go all the way back here to the start of the guide, just scrape it away a little right there. Real easy to control. You can scrape away enough epoxy to where you can get a hold of a thread and get it started and pull it off of there. So that's real easy, and I really like that, and I think a lot of other people will too, so I wanted to share that with you. Let me show you something else you can do with this. I've got a blank here that's clearly very damaged on the finish. It's a solid fiberglass rod, so I'm not so worried about it being nicked or anything. Let me show you how you can use this to get the finish off real easy. Now ordinarily I'd use a razor blade. Let me find an area that's fairly clean here, and I would scrape just like that. And you see how small of an area that takes off, because your point of contact's so small with a razor blade. But you get a little more contact area with this curved blade, so it makes the job a little quicker. It's very comfortable to hold, so you can just sit here and scrape away. And I'm not putting really any pressure on this much, just very light pressure. You can rotate your rod back and forth like that, and you see how quickly you can remove the finish by scraping. Now, if you're doing this on graphite rods, be real careful that you don't nick the graphite that's underneath the weave of the graphite, because that will create a weak spot, and you're almost guaranteed it will break there at some point. But if you just use very minimal pressure, it doesn't take much at all just to remove the finish. Just use minimal pressure, real easy to control, real easy to use, and you can remove finish really quickly. To me, scraping is, in my opinion, a lot safer on a rod than it is to sand it down. You can also use some type of a lacquer thinner or something to try to get finish off, but a lot of times finish is hard to get off a rod. And to me, scraping is the easiest way to do it. So you can scrape all this old finish off of this rod relatively quickly and without a lot of effort. There's not a lot of elbow grease involved in this. I'm just moving it back and forth with very minimal pressure and rotating it as I need to get to areas that need to come off. And this is a lot quicker than I can do this with a razor blade. So that's another thing I think you'd find handy about making you up a little tool like this. These blades come in a package usually of 10 or so, and they'll last practically forever because mostly what you're doing is cutting plastic. These things are made to cut steel, so cutting plastic on it's something that can do very easily. They won't dull very quickly. It's very hard metal and it's very sharp. You can cut yourself on it, but you're not as likely. I would never do this with a razor blade. I don't recommend you do it with this either because you can cut yourself, but I'm just showing you it's a little safer on your fingers. It's a little safer on your rod blanks, and I think it's a good tool to put in your rod building kit.